in the situation of planning a space but not having a space. My plans are going slowly at the moment. They may be sort of on the back burner for the next month whilst I sort out other things in my life. Last week I had an interesting chat with a guy who's in a similar situation to us, up the road in Leicester, which is a medium-sized city here in the UK. It's also planning a co-working space. He was very enthusiastic. He's going to be going to Co-work Europe in Dublin.
Nice, very good. Well, I think, Martin, it's good to recognize when you need to take time and not focus on a project and let that be something that's okay as well. So I'm glad that you're recognizing that fact. I feel like especially now, since you're not committed, you're not paying rent, so you don't have that forced urgency. So I'm glad to hear you're now acknowledging that, and maybe this can be a bit of a time for reflection and reading.
Well, I was still listening and learn from others. It's an ongoing process. I can do some of that all the time anyway.
Absolutely. Well, you're here right now, so that's great. Awesome. And John, and then Mike.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Varig. I'm opening up a co-working office in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we just finally signed a lease after it seemed like a year of negotiations. So that was a big hurdle to get over. And now we are starting on our architectural plans, have those hopefully in for permitting by the end of this month, first part of November, and tentatively looking to try to start construction by the end of the year in December, with a late spring opening of April or May.
Awesome. And remind us the square footage on that?
13,000 square feet.
Nice. Very good. Awesome. Mike, welcome to the party. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Mike Muldoon. I'm actually in Hampton, New Hampshire, seacoast of New Hampshire, a little part of it that sticks out into the ocean there. And so I'm going to be hopefully signing lease sometime this week. With it, we've been working with the landlord, just getting some tenant improvement done, which he's already actually done some of that, kind of new floors in and new paint, with hopefully getting into the space, if everything works out, in December, with kind of our grand opening in January. Hopefully, if we can get that working, that'd be great, because hopefully get some people to buy some co-working spaces for their loved ones for the new year, and that's one of our goals with it too. So I got one sponsor already kind of handshake deal, and a second one hopefully this week. So.
Really? Okay, we're going to need to talk about these sponsors. It's really exciting. And remind us the size of the space.
It's about 850 square feet.
850. Okay, cool. Great. Well, we'll go to introduce Jen, and then Mike, I think I want to come back to you and just ask you a little bit more about your project so everyone else knows a little bit more context. Yeah, we'll go from there. Jen, welcome.
Hi, good morning. I'm Jen Libby. I'm in the north suburbs of Chicago, starting up a day house co-working in 2018. I'm actually going on a site visit for a potential space in an hour, so pretty excited about that. I'll be honest, I'm not sure why I'm on this call. I saw the email from Tony, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll jump on. Because usually I do the Wednesday calls, so I don't know if this is a different group or what, but hey, what's up?
Yeah, so Jen, so the Wednesday group is a part of the sort of like when you joined, we got you into that mastermind group for that period of time. So that's like a specific group that's got continuity, and then this group is kind of for all members of the group. So at various times we do various implementations of different kinds of calls, but this is the open call. So pretty much every Monday at 12 Eastern is when we do anybody can join call. So yeah, I'm glad you're here. And
all right.
The topic is for people this week, loosely based around people specifically opening new spaces. Everybody here is, as you see, in the pre-launch phase, so get to really specifically zero in on issues around that. And so, yeah, we're just going to kind of, see what's going on in different people's worlds right now, what kind of questions are alive for us, and inevitably that becomes valuable for everybody else.
I just wanted to throw out my question before we go back to the issue of sponsorship, which I'm very interested in as well. Right now, what I'm dealing with is build-out costs. I did some research and I went on the Google group, and some people are like, I opened with just a can of paint and, and 2 IKEA desks. And I don't think that's going to fly for my demographic. So something I'm interested in.
All right.
Jen, if you don't mind sharing, where exactly are you? Because my brother-in-law lives up in northern Chicago. So
Highland Park.
Okay. Yeah, he's in Lake Forest and stuff.
Yep. I'm just a town south.
Yeah. So Jen, now I'm tempted to talk directly about that, but we'll come back to it. I'll make a note. Mike, I want to hear a little bit about your project. We talked obviously a bit about it, but I guess in particular, because of the scale of your project and the timeline, it just everything that I've heard so far makes me feel like your project is bigger than the space than it's in. That it's going to be about more than the physical footprint of it, and that there's going to be kind of a more of a story that's being told. And I'm curious if you could kind of give us a sense of how you ended up deciding to do it and what kind of that vision is, and maybe segue that into how these sponsorship conversations started to go.
Yeah. So, I mean, my part of it is probably, physical therapy is what I do, but I have a tech business that I do in terms of apps as well as software in that realm. And been a member of our Mac users group, in fact, president for a while. So it's kind of connections in that community. And essentially what happened was I lost my office at home because we did an addition on the house, and I was searching for space and ended up going to Starbucks a lot to be able to do things. And that wasn't a great space to get some things done. Met a lot of people there who had a similar problem, and basically started talking and said, well, if I did something, would you be interested? And got some soft nods and yeses, and yeah, I'd use it for this. And then I went out probably 9 to maybe 12 months ago and just started looking at spaces and making phone calls. Found a gentleman who owns probably 4 to 5 properties type of thing, and just literally talked to him about it and said, would you be interested in doing this? And back and forth with him, and ironed out essentially the lease that had the language that he wanted in terms of membership agreements and what his lawyer wanted, and talked to the town, made sure it's a permitted use to be able to be done. And essentially we're here today. The little bit of aspect, I guess, that Tony may be talking about is the fact that as a physical therapist, one of the things I'm offering all of my members is the ability to have essentially some physical screens and things, like looking at their whole body, because each of our members are a member of community, so I want to make sure they stay healthy as well. So that's kind of a little aspect of our membership that might make our space a little bit different than the average one. So,
and in terms of your the way that you were able to build that momentum when you were in Starbucks, this has always been kind of an interesting and somewhat elusive question for me. How did you tactically, how did you end up talking to people there and befriending them? For me, a lot of times it was, I'd go Saturday, I try and not steal too much time from the family. So I'd go Saturday mornings at 5:45 to about 8:45, solid and then there were certain times of the week, Tuesdays and things. And I just noticed people that were in there, kind of doing some things. So I just introduce myself, say hello. Hey, what do you do? And the goal of it wasn't honestly to build a co-working space at start. It was just to be a friendly person and see if I could help them in any way, if they could help me. And essentially that's kind of the genesis of this. I've got a gentleman who helped do the graphic design. And I said, okay, we'll do that. I have another person who does some videography. So similar types of people a guy had a Drobo sitting on the desktop in Starbucks. And I was like, that can't be great to lug your Drobo back and forth and do those things. And he's like, no, but it's kind of where I live and my other guy is there. I was like, well, what if there was a space where you could do that and have internet? He's like, well, that'd be cool. I was like, and we had coffee and you wouldn't have to pay for it. Like, yeah. So that's kind of the genesis of what got me to say, I think there's enough people to get this going and make this viable.
and thus solve one of my needs, which is to have a space to be able to do my own thing too. So.
Yeah, totally. I love it. I mean, it's such a natural progression, and it's the story of a lot of successful co-working communities the same way, where, you just start out as a person with a need, you find other people who have the same need because they're showing up to the same place as you are, and then connecting over that and finding opportunities to collaborate. I think there's a lot of lessons that can be taken away from it, but I also love that you didn't come into it with the intention of recruiting. You came into it just as a person. And I think that that's a mindset you can keep even as you're building the business, is to kind of stay in that headspace of being someone who is still a person who's trying to, still just fulfill a need. So Jen, I want to see how that bounces off you, and we'll come back to the sponsorship conversation with Mike. But Jen, your dogs are beautiful, by the way. I just want to say. And what I'm wondering is, yeah, we're talking about you. That's right. Jen, if you are able to kind of check back in with us, I'm curious what you think about Mike's story and what he said in terms of how you might be able to engage these prospective people, because I understand your need to, like, if you're going to occupy a space, you need to be able to do so at a high-end kind of a level, because that's what your market is. And so what you need to be able to do is close the gap between here and there somehow, because you're not independently wealthy right now, to the point where you could just like finance all this out of your pocket, I don't think. And so if if you need to be able to secure that support and that financing to make that happen, how can we close that gap? And I'm wondering, how does that bounce off of you? Like, what's the equivalent of Mike's story for you in terms of building those relationships and kind of getting that momentum built up? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry, Jen.
Sorry. I had to, so you probably didn't hear what I said when I had to go take care of something. That's why I pointed the picture at the dogs.
No, we didn't hear. We just saw you like turn the camera to the dogs without explanation. It was.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm at home. I had to go do something. Working from home, So I confess I did not hear all of Mike's story.
Well, just about, like, Mike was working from home, but he had to leave his home to work elsewhere. He ended up hanging out at a Starbucks regularly, kind of at the same time every week, and then formed kind of relationships with the people who were regularly showing up there. And that formed the foundation for the idea even of doing the space in the first place. And so I think that's kind of a necessary prerequisite to, okay, now that we've got this realization we need to build this, yeah, it's going to require some financing. So let's figure out how to secure that financing as a group. Mm-hmm. And then, that way you've got not just you, but your prospective members and collaborators also helping you to secure that financing that you're going to need. Because if you know that your market is a high-end market and you're going to need high-end, facilities in order to be attracted to it, then awesome. Now you've got to, make that clear to the people who want it, that they've got to help you make it happen. If they need high-end facilities, then that means they're high-end people and they know high-end people. So, that there should be a way to work that magic. Yeah.
Outside of doing pre-sales, which I've projected, if all goes well, hopefully I can get a good mix of people who just want to, kick in a few bucks versus people who want to buy like a lifetime membership for, $10,000 or something. Outside of that, and hopefully courting some local investors, that's pretty much all I've got right now.
Okay. Yeah. And in terms of like where these people are, like where are they hanging out? Where can you find them?
Well, I'm active on a couple of different philanthropy boards in the area. So I know I've got a pretty good base starting from that. My network is pretty good, actually. I was just talking to my real estate guy, and he's really well connected in the area, and is, he just mentioned a bunch of people. I'm like, oh yeah, I know that person. I know that, so there's really great synergy happening there. As far as physically where they go, in town, certainly it's the the Pilates boutiques and the offbeat coffee shop. Actually, I'm doing a work sprint at one on Wednesday after our call. I just went ahead and did it. And I've gotten 10 people who said, "Oh yeah, that's awesome. I want to come," which means we'll probably have 4.
Sure.
So, but that's great. I'm good with that. So yeah, and then of course, since I'm targeting women who have children, there's a really, really strong network of moms just in the towns right around here. They love to talk and recommend businesses and things like that and support each other. So I'm tapped into quite a few of those networks as well. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm just thinking about kind of making that bridge a little bit less scary between the momentum building that you're doing now leading up to the bigger space. And I'm really glad to hear you're organizing the work sprint. I know we talked in an earlier call about the discouragement that you can get if you organize an event and it doesn't go well, or you don't get a lot of attendance. And the fact that you have 10 people who even said that they wanted to go is great. And I think also it's important in these early stages. So much of the energy, so much of the investment that pays off for you as the founders of your spaces is in that initial group. So even if it requires, a huge amount of labor intensive attention to get that initial group to really cohere, it pays off in the end, because that initial core will really make the attracting of the next, several hundred members that much easier. So, putting a lot of the initial work. So when you say 10 people say they're going, but only 4 are going to show, that is totally normal and natural and what's to be expected, unless you really personalize it. So if you're saying, the day before the event, if you send a text message to each person saying, "Hey, Jill, I really hope that you can make it tomorrow. Looking forward to seeing you. I'm really grateful you said you can come." You might be able to get it up to 8 or 10, and if it's 4, that's fine too. But I'm just glad that you're doing it. I'm glad that you're playing with stuff and whatever happens is good. And so
I was totally overthinking it too. So I'm really glad that we talked about that on Wednesday. And you're like, no, just send it out there. And so I did.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you for telling me. So sometimes I tell people to do stuff, I have no idea what happens next. This is a standing request from Tony. If you take my advice, please tell me so that I know. But I'm glad you did it, and I'm grateful for it. So just to catch you guys up, when Jen and I had this conversation, she was saying that she had this event that she did, and that it didn't go as well as she wanted. She wasn't really happy with the result, and so she was feeling a little bit less inclined to continue to do it.
The result was okay, but the effort that I put into it, I put so much effort into it for result.
Mm-hmm. There you go. And so, right, thank you for clarifying that. So the thing that we ended up coming up with was just really, really, really distilling down to the simplest form. How can you be inviting people without making it a lot of work for yourself, especially in the very, very beginning, but even not in the beginning? You could do this when you've been running a space for years, where, it's so easy to go down this track. I can't tell you how many times I've thought of an idea for a new business, and then I end up thinking about, oh, this business is a great idea, and I could build a website for it, and the website's going to have these pages, and then I end up lost in WordPress theme. I have 50 WordPress theme tabs open, and now I'm exhausted, and I don't even like the idea anymore. So I end up creating all this work for myself, when really all you need to do with any new idea is say, how can I make this distill down to 2 sentences? Hey, I'm going to be gathering people to talk about X next Thursday at 10 o'clock at this location. And, can you join? So it's literally 2 sentences. You can send it. The thing that you need is, the place, the time, the date, and that's it. And then you send that to people, and then they show up or they don't. But that makes it super, super easy to get something going without needing to do an event RSVP, without having to have a logo or a website. It's so easy to fall down that trap. even creating a Facebook event, which is relatively straightforward, you still have to write a description. Then you have to create a cover photo, or you have to pick one out, and then you go on Shutterstock and you're picking out a stock image for, like, it's hours of stuff that at any point you might get distracted and then not do the event. So forget it. Don't do it. Now, if you do one event and people show up just by you directly emailing them, awesome. Now you have some momentum, and now I think it's a lot easier for you to invest that 2 hours or whatever it is to, make the next event a formal one with an RSVP. And then, if that momentum builds, then at some point it makes a lot more sense to build a website or do whatever. But I don't know. I try to streamline this stuff as much as possible. So even having a website, put it off as long as you can. And, maybe, okay, I'm contradicting myself. Put off the complicated parts. You could have a website with just an email capture because we want to capture emails, but, that's easy to do. You could hand code in HTML, just an email capture and a logo and a pretty stock photo in the background in about an hour. And then, it just saves you a ton of time and money. And then you could come back and refresh it later. So, so kudos to you, Jen. Please let us know how it goes. I'm very excited for you. Okay, cool. So sponsorship. Mike, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the sponsorship you were describing and just how you were able to make it happen, because that's really exciting.
Well, so basically it came a little bit from that Mac users group. So I've been the president of the Mac users group, which meets monthly for about 6 years. And we usually meet at local junior high. And during the summertime, we don't have a space. So there's a local place called Experimac. They're basically they work on vintage Macs. So essentially it's, if you're over 3 years old, they basically work on those Macs and do what they need to do. And so I just reached out to them and said, hey, could we have it in your space this summer? And they said, yeah, sure. And we had done it last summer one time. And so I got to know the owner. And over time, I told them I was opening a co-working space come this time. I said, hey, I'd love to go out to lunch with you, just talk about how something can be mutually beneficial. And we sat down, we had lunch. I told him what we're going to do. Asked him if, we could actually get some of his units like in the space so people could see that if they had a broken Mac, iPad, anything else like that, they could do it. I told him we'd give them, space on our website to be able to have their logo and a link, as well as just actually a picture in the actual space for people to have. And I said, in turn, what I do is I do essentially refresh the content I have, do 6 events that kind of spotlight him as a sponsor on, anything from backing up your Mac to security on it to what to do if your iPhone goes down or different things like that. And so we just talked it over, and I said, what do you think about that? And he said, yeah, that sounds pretty good. He said, well, how much would that cost me? And I came up with a number and I gave it to him. He's like, I'd be willing to do that. Okay, sure. Sounds good. I said, I'll get the agreement over to you. And how about we do it for next year? And if it goes well, we can sign you up for the next year too. Okay, sure. Sounds good. And shook on it. And so I'm going to meet with him I think the end of this month, just to kind of sign everything off, type of thing. But he's a pretty good guy. I mean, he's like, yeah, it's definitely reasonable for us. Because I'd already kind of, in having the Mac users group there, one of our members, I think, spent $500 and bought a new iMac or things like that. So he's already seen that, just the relationships brought him some business. So, and it's just, as I said to him, I said, my goal with relationships is, hey, look, they do a great job at repairing your stuff really quickly when you need it. And I think it's a good synchronous thing. Because I think half the people, well, actually 3/4 of the people who are potentially in the space all have Macs and they're older ones. So that's the story with that one.
Okay. I'm loving all of your stories, Mike. So in particular this, because it comes to you very intuitively, but I think to a lot of people it doesn't, that you see this opportunity where this company that does this thing that isn't ostensibly related to co-working really does overlap tremendously with what you have, because everybody there uses computers. People, have older devices they're trying to repair or they want to make use of, and the opportunities for collaboration overlap so tremendously. Now these people are, obviously not just sponsors, but kind of partners. They're probably going to help you raise a lot of awareness of the project, help bring you a lot of customers. I mean, that sounds like a terrific way to get to know to get the community to know who you are. And man, especially when it comes to device repair, I don't know if these guys deal with like iPhone screen repair type stuff, because I know that's, kind of consumer grade, high volume, but it is incredible how much people need those kinds of repairs and things. We had someone in our co-working space. So a friend hired somebody to repair their screen, their broken screen, and she actually did like an on-site, like she came to the space and set up her thing and did the screen replacement in the space. And you could not believe people wouldn't, like, everyone who walked past her was like, whoa, what are you doing? Are you repairing phone screens? I have a phone in my bag. Like, can you come and fix my phone? Like, she couldn't leave. She was like swimming in business. It was incredible. It was like practically it was a honeypot. I mean, just having this person here, where people were really into it. And
they also buy stuff too. So they buy like a used one and will pay you for it too. So, and it's just, and they sell used things, I also talked to them this week about getting essentially a Mac Mini for our main screen, and saying, I was like, hey, rather than buying it, can I basically essentially, as part of the thing, just put a big sticker on it that says it's yours and we can use it, and then at the end we give it back to you? He's like, yeah, that sounds fair. I'm like, all right. So just trying to get free stuff essentially. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the more you can barter, the better, right? It's terrific. It goes in a lot of directions. So that's really cool. And you can see how this is the tip of the iceberg, that there are that many more relationships to be had with other service providers or other people in the community where, they have something to offer that's of interest and of value to your members. And you can't necessarily quite predict what it's going to be. A lot of it comes down to who you happen to meet and who's open to a new relationship at that particular moment and looking for something. So kudos to you. So Mike, if you don't mind, I want to take that nugget and use that as a galvanizing for a bit of a conversation with John and with Jen to say, who is the equivalent of that, who's within your reach? What kind of conversations are you having with them? Do you know people who kind of could be those people right now? Or if not, how might you find them? Does that make sense? John, I'm looking at you because I haven't heard much from you yet. And
I'm just taking it all in.
Okay.
Right off the top of my mind, I can't, I'm not placing someone, but as I may have mentioned, I'm hosting a meetup in 2 weeks, and there's some individuals there that, obviously the founder of this group, by putting it out to him and asking him, what would be similar type groups that Mike's working with that might be interested in doing something, bringing these people together. So it's good information. Like I said, I'm just sort of pondering what my next step.
Totally great. Okay, so this is a great opportunity because you have this event coming up, and I think that gives you something to aim for. So what do you say? What do you say when you're in this crowd? You can be pitching people on your idea, which is kind of the default, but you can also be kind of casting it as, maybe this is, I'm building kind of a village kind of a concept, and we need all the different people in our village who can do stuff. I need someone who can help with finance stuff. I need someone who can help with legal stuff, with tech stuff. So if you have services you can provide to your fellow neighbors, then I would love to talk to you about how we can work together to facilitate your serving of my community. And so then you could actually make a really explicit call for, hey, I'm looking for people who have skills in these various fields that are useful. And that inevitably ends up being a very symbiotic relationship. And maybe that's not something you do like on a stage in front of everybody. Maybe it is, but it's certainly something you have in mind when you're starting to talk to people, where you have that hook in your head where you say, oh, I'm talking to someone who, this person is a local service provider. Awesome. I've got this in my pocket, that this can be a potential avenue. Everything Mike just did, copy it, right? Steal that concept. That's perfect. And it doesn't have to be that formal. It doesn't have to be a sponsorship arrangement. It could just be a relationship, but whatever it is, there's some way to facilitate that, which I think could be of huge value to you.
Yeah, I think it's just finding out what people do, what their business is, and then see if it's a fit for our business.
Have you got a people tracker going?
Yes, there is. Well, I don't have it for. I just know who signed up. They just put out the invitation last Friday, and I checked on Saturday. There was already 24 people signed up, so pretty good response.
Terrific.
I guess offering free beer doesn't hurt.
Free beer definitely works. I'm sorry, I meant for your project. Like, are you tracking your prospects and prospective?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Very good. Yeah, so when you meet people, you collect some info, and then you can populate that list and start to see who you need to loop back with and in what capacity.
Absolutely.
Neat. Cool. And how's that looking in your world, Jen? Are you finding people in your community who maybe could be service providers in some form?
Yeah, I am. As I talk to people, they'll say things like, "Oh, I'm a website designer. I'd love to help you out." And I guess what I have to think about is, okay, do they want to be a member of the community and give me free services, and in exchange I give them a discounted membership? Or do we want to enter some sort of a sponsorship agreement? I just had somebody contact me the other day and said, "Oh, I'd love to talk to your group about how small businesses can market themselves." And I was thinking, okay, that's more of a sponsorship thing. That's more like, you pay me X amount and then I let you set up office hours and you have access to my community. Or number 3, are they other local businesses that can provide goods, like, furniture? There's a really cool tea shop in town. Can I get their tea? And then I'm not sure about how to approach that with them without and just making sure that there's value in it for them. Obviously right now we don't have a space, so those categories, the number 3, that doesn't really work just yet. But part of me feels a little spammy, saying, "Hey, can I have your product?" And in return, here's what you'll get access to my community. I don't know. So I feel like there's those 3 different buckets that people can potentially go into, and I kind of think about that whenever I meet someone.
All right. So in terms of that mindset versus what we just heard Mike kind of describe in that little story, what do you think is the difference between those stories? Like what's the difference between approaching this in a way that feels kind of spammy versus one that really results in a lot of good kind of, positive outcomes?
Just thinking about my previous experience, just when I used to be a blogger and things like that, you have to give them your media kit with all your stats. I feel like just having some stats, to back up what it is that you're offering, so that there's clear value to the person providing the services or the goods. And I guess I feel like I don't necessarily have those stats yet because I don't have a formal community.
Yeah, well, it seems like, before you can get to that point even, a lot of what this comes back to is just relationships. So if it's I'm Jen, you're whoever you are, we're just people, we do our things. Maybe we're both doing business stuff, but our relationship is one of, human connection and it's authentic. Then, it's easier to have a business conversation with someone with whom you have a great relationship, because it's almost at that point like, I don't want to say a fait accompli, but it's kind of like, hey, we could probably do some business stuff together too. And the other person, yeah, absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. And then, then it's like a conversation. It sounds like it could be difficult, could actually become really, really easy.
Yeah, I'm having a conversation like that with one of the play spaces in town where I held my first meetup. And we've talked about the possibility of her basically taking over the childcare piece of my space. Now I don't have to deal with it at all. She's a new business, but she's got a really great brand. And yeah, I mean, that's falling into the category that you're talking about, where I see her like once a week. So we've got a great relationship going.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I mean, yeah, the more you're able to kind of avoid formalities and let it be kind of a natural conversation, I think the easier the relationships will be when they need to become formal. So I'd almost think about, how can I do this without without making it, something that's too, rigid or formalized. And then, if it can be really natural, really casual, really personal, then that can lead to more business down the line.
I've got to go park my ass at the tea shop and like make sure that they know me.
Oh, yes, absolutely. It's underrated, but just showing up consistently to the same place, even once a week, but just making that kind of your regular, I'm here, this is what I do, you can find me here, really means a lot to people.
Yeah.
And as we kind of develop a rhythm for your event programming, I think that's where you'll have a chance to establish that. And hey, if you have the agency, if you don't have a job dictating your schedule, and like this time that you're going to do this work sprint, if you can do that every week at the same time in the same place, and you could change it up if you really need to, but if you can do that at the same time in the same place, it really, really helps a lot for people to know that there's that thing that they can count on.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of the best communities I've ever seen all at some point had that in pre-launch development. Yeah. So my hope is to get all of you on that track at some point, to have, if you don't already, to have some kind of program that you're doing. And there's a lot of different ways you can play. It can be public, it can be private, it can be big, it can be small, but just having some rhythm, because people really, it's a strange thing. People respond to rhythm. I think it's actually it might even be like a biological thing in the way where it's, it kind of proves to people that you're for real if you can show up consistently to a place, which is kind of funny, but I think it's true. I think people judge whether you're for real based on whether you are able to do something consistently for long enough. That's how you catch some of the people who are not at the very front of the bell curve. The people in the middle of the bell curve kind of wait to see if you're for real. And that for realness is determined by your consistency and your continuity. Sorry, I'm ranting. Who has we got about 18 minutes left here. What other questions are on your mind? What's alive for you right now? This is open to everybody. What are you thinking about?
Can we talk about buildout?
Yes, let's talk about buildout. Give us a little bit more. We talked a bit about kind of the financing part, but hit me with it again, Jen. Like what?
So I'm just having a hard time budgeting for it, and I know that part of it's going to depend on how much the landlord is going to kick in. But like I said, on the Google group, there's some people that said they spent like literally $20 for a can of paint. And then I regularly meet with some SCORE mentors, and they were saying, oh yeah, it's going to be like $100,000. There's got to be some, the truth has got to be somewhere in the middle.
John, I'm looking at you. Do you think you could shed a little light?
Yeah, Jen, it's a great question, because so much depends on the developer and who you're working with, and whether or not maybe you're working with a real estate broker that can do some shopping around for you. One way or another, the developer, depending on how much they give you in terms of TIs, they're going to recapture that. So it might sound like great if you're getting $20 a square foot, $30 a square foot, but they're going to factor that into the rent. Other developers say, we're going to give you a cold, dark shell, but your rent's going to be very cheap. So it's a question. One of the nice things is I'd rather have the developer finance my TIs than have to go out and do it myself, because that just adds to your initial exposure, and you can amortize that obviously over whether it's 5 or 10 years that you're in the lease. But a lot depends too. I don't know if you're working with an architect, and I mean, that might be the first step, is just designing out your space so you can get a rough idea, take those plans to, or maybe just even a contract if you can't afford an architect, say, here's what I want to do in this space. Can you give me a rough idea? Because it depends. Oftentimes, are you having to put in infrastructure type things with water and sewer, or is that already in? Then you also, like you said, you got to factor in your furniture. So it's better to get a total package from the outset and know what your total exposure is than sort of piecemeal it together. But I think, if you have an architect friend, that would be a great place to start, or even a designer saying, here's a rough plan of how we could lay this out. And you've got so many walls with glass, and whether you're putting carpeting or wood or, drop ceiling, all that adds. So, sometimes maybe you could look for more industrial space that's just cool as is and add to it. Any type of new building is probably going to be, there's ADA requirements that they have to put these things in, which once again adds to your cost. So just ask as many questions as possible and shop around.
Yeah, that's where I'm going after this, actually.
Fair enough. Does that kind of give you a starting point, Jen, or where else kind of?
Well, it confirms what I was thinking about, and I've been told that if you can have the landlord or the developer pay, the more that they pay for, the better, even if it means that your rent goes up a little bit, because like John said, then you don't have to have that initial capital outlay that goes towards the build out. Tony, in your experience, do you have a price range? I mean, I know that totally depends on so many different aspects.
Yeah.
But let's say somebody in a suburban environment who might want to make things look a little bit nicer. I don't know. Any thoughts? Cost per square foot?
Yeah, there is. There are industry numbers.
Mm-hmm.
The industry range is between $15 and $25 a square foot.
Okay.
That's my understanding based on what I've heard professionals tell me.
And that's just build out. That's not rent.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, what they call it is FFE, for furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So I think basically everything that isn't rent, and deposit. So like deposit being an extension of the rent. So, if you want to come up with how much money do I need, you'd basically do this number and the rent number. And that's, your entire budget outside of staff costs and marketing costs. And maybe I'm missing some things. So actually, no, it's not your entire budget, but you get the idea. In terms of build out and preparing the space itself, I would say that's the range. And as you've said, there have been people who've spent way more than that. There have been people who've spent zero. So a lot of it does depend on the space. But as John kind of alluded to, every space is priced based on the amount of work that you may have to put into it. So you could go into a space tomorrow that's maybe ready to go, absolutely perfect, where you just got to bring in some desks and everything's already lovely. You'll just be paying a lot more per square foot, as opposed to like what we did in New York, which we got a space that needed to be built out. It was just an empty shell. And so a lot of work needed to go into it, but the cost per square foot was very low. Now, if you take the cost of the build out, and the landlord was not going to do any tenant improvements. So we had to do the improvements. But we just took the cost of the improvements and amortized that over the course of the lease and determined that even with that additional work, the cost per square foot was still much lower than walking in the door of a perfect space. So that was the math we had to do to figure it out. So all this becomes a lot more real once you're actually dealing with a physical space. Mm-hmm. But at this stage, you're working with estimates. So maybe you're just playing with the estimate to give you a sense of what the budget could be. And, maybe you start with $15, $20 a square foot as a starting point. And I would say that those numbers are industry numbers from the people who are kind of used to the more high end, or at least medium end, serviced office industry type thing. And so, like my cost per square foot was probably lower than that, maybe 12. I don't remember the exact number. I have to do the math, but I was also lower end. You're a little higher end. So you might still be kind of in that range, in a $15, $20 range, maybe more. I don't know, but that would be what I would guess. I would play with those numbers in that 15, 20 range and see if it blows up the budget completely, or at least see what you end up with.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, totally. Any other build out related questions or in terms of planning?
Yeah, Tony, just probably one for me. I mean, I kind of got more just conversation with the landlord, like I said, because he's kind of, I can have that literally in the space and we walk through it, and I was like, okay, these carpets, what can we do with that? And he had put laminate in another space that was in the building where this space is. And then, he's willing to do the paint. And then really the other piece that we needed was there was no like kitchenette or something else like that, to be able to have. And so that was the big piece of true build out that I needed him to be able to do. So I kind of essentially negotiated that with him, and we just went back and forth. He's like, well, if you did this long of a lease, it'd be this amount. If you want to do this long of a lease, it'll be this amount. And so, we just kind of settled on where we're at. And even there's a clause in it too, that if he can't get the kitchen done by the time we're supposed to go in, he's going to lower the rent by about $200 a month or something else like that till he gets it done. So that's kind of how we negotiated it through. Because if we don't have it right away, it's probably not a big deal, but it's something that he can get done while we're kind of opening. So.
Right. Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. You know what else might be nice is, again, thinking from like the neighborhood and the context of the city perspective is, first of all, just looking out for deals, looking out for other businesses in the community that maybe could help with this. I know we saved a ton of money by befriending people who are in the ISP business who had hardware and who were able to help us set up our network, which would have been a huge undertaking, and they just handled it for us, and that was really easy. And even getting some some Craigslist searches, get some alerts going to your inbox. You can filter it, but at least collecting some data so you can start to get vibes for how you might be able to nab some good deals on some of the pricier pieces. A lot of times you'll find, depending on the size of your city and how it works and where you live, but a lot of times you'll find office liquidations where people are getting rid of 50 chairs all in one shot, and you can get them for pennies on the dollar. And I've had amazing experience. We got like 15 really nice monitors from a startup that was just shutting down, going out of business. And it was just a fire sale. They were just giving stuff away, and it was good, high-end, decent stuff, and they just needed to get it out. So, if you tune into that, you may be not ready to just jump in the car and go buy a bunch of stuff right off the bat. You don't need a bunch of hardware rotting in your basement, but it could give you a vibe for what's out there and start to give you a sense of what kinds of opportunities you have. I know the folks at the Brooklyn Brainery in Brooklyn, they do education and stuff, but they were kind of dabbling in co-working. They've been just amazing. I don't want to say dumpster divers, but they've been just very good at, keeping their eyes out for good deals and stuff on the street and stuff in the junkyards and, things like that. And just, really piecing together something that has a lot of character over the course of years. Obviously you need basic stuff to open the doors, but then over the course of time, you can kind of build out some more interesting details and add some flourishes and some pieces from there.
Hey, Jen, I was going to ask you a question. Did you say Highland Park or Lake Forest is the?
I'm in Highland Park. Lake Forest is immediately north. Yeah.
Okay. I used to be in the retail business, and I went into an old textile mill that was part of Charlotte. It was very close to the uptown, but all the textile industry had left. So there's all these old, beautiful, historic buildings, and the city was really trying to revamp this area. So they actually had a grant program that would offer new businesses money for signage and landscaping. And you might just check, I know that's a very affluent area, but there might be a district that they're trying to revamp or revitalize that no. Maybe you have to go further down into Chicago to find that.
Yes.
Good stuff. Build out's a pain. It's expensive. A lot of decisions have to be made, and it can be hard. It can be hard, on the founder, because you have these decisions. They're consequential. They cost money, and I feel like you never quite know that you're making the right decision because there could always be a better deal out there, or whatever it is. So I would say, a lot of it comes down to managing that, just recognizing the fact that it is what it is, and you're never going to have perfect information, and also that, depending on what your budget situation is, you might not get your ideal setup on the first try. And so, maybe you've got it all specced out with Turnstone where you know exactly what you would do to make your space look perfect if you have, $100,000 to spend on furniture, but then you don't secure that money, in time for the initial launch. So you end up spending, $100 a chair on the Office Max chair that you can get delivered tomorrow. And those chairs will last you a year or two. But then in a year or two, maybe those chairs got you far enough that you were able to get through the opening of your space and making it profitable. And now you're able to secure a big sponsorship. And now, you can plan for at your 1 year anniversary or your 2 year anniversary, a great refresh. And at that point, you've got a bunch of customers who are ready to support you in improving your furniture situation. So, we're trying to take things that are big here and then just make them smaller. And then if there are bigger parts that have to happen, we can shift it out once we've, established a little bit. We've taken root, kind of like a plant moving from a tiny planter into larger plants. Planters, we'll get you to the larger planter. It might just take a little time to graduate you up there.
Jen, I was going to add, if you do find a developer that's willing to give you a pretty decent TI allowance, expect to have to sign a personal guarantee with that. They're usually not going to give that out without something in return. So, but even with a personal guarantee, you can look to burn that off over so much time instead of having that run through the duration of your term. Maybe after you have that burn off as you pay back X amount. So after maybe 3 years, you paid off all that tenant improvement.
Yeah, there's lots of games you can play with the lease. Who was it in an earlier call who said that she couldn't make rent? She was like 6 months in, she couldn't make the rent. And so she negotiated with the landlord, who was very friendly with her, to put the rent into the lease. So the rent just went up, basically to help her get over the fact that there was, a month or two that she couldn't cover. The landlord still gets their money, but she's able to stay in business instead of going into default. So having, doing the work to forge a good relationship with the landlord, and find the best possible relationship you can be an absolute difference maker. I mean, certainly at least avoiding a bad landlord, because that can be, a killer as well. And, obviously this is something that there are no obvious, perfect, easy answers. Some people get luckier than others, but we just want to give you the best possible chance. And, so that's another major decision. That's something we should all be aware of. John, you're already committed, and Mike as well. But for you, Jen and Martin, is once you're talking to landlords and trying to suss out, is this the person I should pull the trigger with? Come to us. Let's talk about it, because that's exactly the kind of thing that, we want to make a really good consideration of. There's a lot of factors at play, and whether or not it's a good answer is often not super obvious. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times it isn't. And the trade-offs there are very tricky, where, maybe it's the difference between, this is going to open for business in a couple of months, or I don't know when it's going to open for business, because if I don't do this deal, I don't know when the next deal is going to come. And figuring out whether to, hold out for the more ideal situation versus, working with the less than ideal thing that is the bird in hand is exactly the kind of thing that is worthwhile to talk through with other people who've thought about it. So once that starts to materialize, let's make sure we have those conversations available to us. Cool. All right. Any last minute thoughts or questions? Any next steps that you guys are thinking about in terms of what you need to do that you want to just kind of share with the group so we can keep you accountable?
For me, Tony, the next thing is, rather than just sponsorships, it's kind of discounts for members. So in the same building, I'm just thinking creatively, there's a nail place, and the landlord knows them pretty well. So I'm just going to go and talk to them, introduce them myself. And right in there's also a hairdresser. So I thought, even if the members aren't women, but maybe they have wives or things like that, just to try and negotiate. Maybe members get a discount and their spouses at these businesses, that I can drive some business into them and do those type of things. So it's kind of looking for those other opportunities. There's a pizza place within steps of it, and just seeing if maybe I can talk to those people. So that's kind of my next steps in that. Kind of still networking, but not really definitive sponsorships.
Yeah. Hey, you get into the good graces of the right hairdressers in town, and you could be, Jen's nodding. Yeah. I mean, because they talk all day to each other, right? Like the word spreads.
Yeah.
So.
Sure.
Yeah.
I already introduced myself to the owner, so as I was kind of in there. So yeah.
I like it. Very good. It's clever. All right. I love it. That's a great way to close out. Guys, it's been so fun to hang with you. Please hit up the group if you have questions in the meantime. Otherwise, we'll catch you again in a week or so. And keep it up the great work. Keep being awesome.
Thanks, Tony.
Awesome. All right.
Thanks, Tony. Bye.
All right. Take care.